Yo, what's going on, world? This your boy Najee from Cigar Talk, and today I have a very special guest, man. Boxing fans, listen, I have one of the most 50 influential people in boxing, my man, Mr. Brian Custer. How are you, sir?
Good to be here. Good to be with you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for your time. Man, it's a lot going on in the boxing world right now, man.
A whole lot.
A whole lot going on.
A whole lot.
Yeah, all right, so let's start this past weekend. Obviously, we got one of the biggest crossover fights.
Yeah.
MMA Tyson Fury versus Ngannou. I saw your tweet. You said, I don't care what the judges' scorecard said. Ngannou won that fight.
He won it.
I thought so too. What'd you think? Was it just, obviously fights are scored round by round, but did you feel like there was a case for Fury to win that?
I mean, I think if you looked at it and you said, okay, he certainly controlled it for the most part with his jab.
Yep.
And did a lot with that. But I think if you looked at punches landed, power punches landed, I thought Ngannou, to be honest with you, Ngannou looked like the more experienced fighter. I thought Fury was falling over his feet.
Yeah.
Was wild. I think, listen, this is my thoughts on it. I think Fury trained, but didn't train hard. Thought, okay, this guy's going to come in like most MMA fighters, going to be wild.
Right.
It's going to be a lot of looping punches. I'm just going to box this guy, and I can beat him given my CB game.
Right.
And Mike Tyson did a really good job with Ngannou.
Absolutely.
And the guy can punch. You saw that he can punch really hard. And I think that took Tyson by surprise. And I was surprised. I thought maybe Ngannou would gas out, but he didn't gas out. And I thought there were points, I thought Fury looked more tired than Ngannou.
Absolutely. Definitely toward the later rounds. Were you surprised? I was definitely surprised at Ngannou's mechanics, right? Like, he looked like a boxer. Most MMA guys, they lean in, they're off balance. And I'm like, dang, this guy, he looks steady. He's not just only throwing the power, but the distance control looked good. He switched southpaw.
He did a great job with his footwork. I think give Mike a lot of credit.
Yeah.
I think Mike did a good job with his footwork. I think Mike did a great job in showing him his range. He had a really long range, and he kept it where he needed it. And look, he did a phenomenal job touching him here, hitting him to the body. I liked everything that Ngannou did. Look, I can see why he wants to fight again.
Right. Do you think there's a place for him now, like in the sport with that performance, right? Obviously, Tyson Fury's probably the best heavyweight right now that boxing has to offer. Do you think Ngannou now has a place in the heavyweight division?
Based off that performance, yes. I think there are a lot of people who saw that and said, man, I wouldn't mind seeing him against, let's say, a Deontay Wilder or somebody else like that because of the way he performed.
Right. What do you think about these crossover matchups? Like, are these something that you feel like, does it help the sport? Does it hurt the sport? What's your opinion just on the crossover? I
just think, I'm maybe a little bit different. I just think, like with any sport, you evolve. And it's just something that's here now. And, I think a lot of it depends, too, on how serious the person takes it. And, I think McGregor Mayweather was obviously the first one, and, kind of think Conor going into that fight really thought like, yo, I'm such a great striker that I can beat this guy. Man, I mean, that's Floyd.
That's Floyd. Be clear.
Stop. And to be quite honest about it.
Right.
Floyd carried him for a couple of rounds.
For sure.
Just to, hey.
Absolutely. Get your money's worth.
Hey, get the money's worth.
Yeah.
He carried him for a few rounds. But yeah, I think you get a guy in there who, like Ngannou, who was set focus on showing himself well and really putting into you train with Mike Tyson and put in that work, and Tyson even said, no, we put in a lot of work together. I think there's a place for some of those, absolutely.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised because his training videos, it didn't look, I'm like, his little hitting the pad work was a little suspect.
But you ain't going, that's the kind of stuff you ain't trying to put out there. You want to put that stuff out there. Not the real stuff.
Strategy, you're right.
Not the real stuff. That's the kind of stuff you want to put out there so that guys like Fury look like, I'm going to kill this guy.
Right.
And you see what happened.
So speaking of real stuff, November 25th. Benavidez versus Andrade. That's a real fight.
I love it.
That is a real fight.
You got two guys who've claimed they've been avoided for a long time.
Yeah.
And why not fight each other? They're the two who really want Canelo, and why not fight it out to see who deserves that fight? And I think even if you're Canelo, after that you got to take them seriously. I mean, he's told Benavidez that. He's told Demetrius that. Why don't you go fight somebody? Well, now they fighting each other.
Yeah.
You know, let's get it on. And I think this is going to be a really good fight.
I agree. You know what? It's interesting because I feel like just listening to the boxing chatter, it feels like a lot of people are sleeping on Andrade. And, you know, Benavidez is the Mexican monster.
Yeah.
But I think this is it is a very interesting fight. If Brian Custer had a prediction, how do you see this fight going in your mind?
I certainly wouldn't give a prediction because, you know, we have to do the fight.
Yeah.
But I think here's the difference. I think when you look at when David fought Caleb Plant, you know, Caleb won a lot of those early rounds. And then all of a sudden in the second half of the fight, David came on and said, okay, I just got to pressure this guy and kind of overwhelmed him.
Yep.
Now, Caleb told me there were reasons that he got overwhelmed in the second half of the fight. He got cut and couldn't really see. He kind of lost his range with him. So he had some reasons why. But the fact of the matter is David overwhelmed him with the pressure and ended up getting the victory. I don't know if you can do that with Boo Boo. And I think people sleep on Boo Boo. Boo Boo was an Olympian.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say what you want about he hasn't fought this guy or he hasn't fought this and that. Well, there's a reason why these guys don't want to fight. He's awkward.
Yeah.
And he can box. He's got some pop. And I know people are like, oh, he knocks people down but doesn't finish them. Well, he does have pop. And I think Demetrius is a really smart guy.
Yeah.
It may be more technical than what people believe that fight is going to be. And that goes to the skill level of Demetirus Andrade.
Yeah. Do you think the weight will have anything to do with this fight? Obviously, Demetirus Andrade fought Damon, I believe, in '68. That was his first fight moving up. Benavidez has been in '68 for a while. Do you see the weight being an issue at all?
Yeah, you know, we talked to David about that, and I asked him about, you know, people talked about how you looked emaciated, trying to drain your body down to stay at 168. And he said, look, this is what I got to do. He said, there are a couple of more fights that I think I need at this weight. And if that's the sacrifice I got to make, then I got to make it. He said, you know, on fight day, when I rehydrate, I felt great. So I got to take him at his word that he's done that he's got the nutritionist to help him get down at 168 in a somewhat healthy manner and be at his best. He claims not only Andrade, obviously Canelo, but he also said David Morrell is another fight that he wants.
That's a great fight. That's a great
at
fight.
168. He said, and after those three, it'd be time for me to move up. He said.
So tell me about the interview. I watched your interview, Last Stand podcast.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that also. But I watched that with Andrade. And he came out and said, fuck Canelo. Like, he fucked Canelo.
Yeah.
Like, and obviously, Canelo had the viral meme moment. He called him a horrible fighter and he won a payday. Like, I love that. I use that meme all the time. But do you think, you know, Canelo's caught a lot of flack over the years just on people saying that, you know, he's picking and choosing fights or maybe ducking or whatever. How do you see that? Like a guy like Canelo, who arguably has the best resume in the sport, do you think that the moves he's been making and the fights that he's taken in the last few years, would you consider that ducking like some say?
I think you get in a position where you earn that right now to do what you want. Kind of control your own business. I mean, he kind of controlled how much he got when he went over to DAZN, and he got that huge deal. And, you know, obviously they didn't like maybe some of the choices he made when it came to opponents, but credit to him. You gonna pay me that much money? Yeah, I'm gonna pick and choose who I want.
Right.
You know what I mean? And now that he had chose to come with PBC's paying him a lot of money. What, $50 million a fight?
That's what they said.
And so now you can choose who you want. Now listen, I think you gotta remember there's the fighter, there's your team. I think the fighter always wants to fight. Me and you talking stuff about me, well, let's get it on.
Right.
The team may think something different.
Right.
They may look at it and say, I don't know, bro. I don't like that. I want to keep making money. I don't want to see you take a loss.
Sure.
So we're going to choose somebody else. All right, well, whoever y'all put in front of me. I don't think he is the one selecting these guys. I think it's more of his team. You know, that's more of like maybe Eddie Reynoso and those guys.
Yep.
But Canelo, yo, give me who you want to smoke. Let's go.
Bad man.
You want
He's
it?
still a bad man.
I'll fight
Right.
all of them.
Right.
I'll fight all of them. I think
For
that's
sure.
how, and I think that's how most elite level fighters are.
Yeah.
Now the teams may think something different.
Absolutely. And I guess that's the team's job to look out for the business interest of the fighter.
Absolutely.
You know? Man, this next fight, man, it's kind of bittersweet for me, Brian. You know, we saw the reports. Showtime. This is, you know, we're coming to the final end. I don't know if they said there might be one more fight
have another
after
one. We'll have
November.
another one in December. We'll have this will be a pay-per-view, but then in December it'll be the last Showtime Championship Boxing.
Yeah.
37 years
Man.
coming to an end. It's disappointing for all of us.
It is. It's a big deal, you know, because I remember when HBO came, that was a blow, and now Showtime is, you know, the game is rapidly changing. You as somebody who's one of the faces of Showtime boxing, and, you know, you've been here at such a high level for a while. How do you feel just approaching, you know, the end of something like that?
Heartbroken. I mean, that was emotional. I think for me, for a number of my colleagues, I mean, for me, it was 10 years. You know, 10 of those 37 years, blood, sweat, and tears that I put into that network. You know, from calling those fights to being out front to those fights to doing the Last Stand podcast with the network. So it hurt. I mean, I think you look at the history and you look at the fights, Castillo, Corrales. I mean, historic fights.
Yeah.
Holyfield, Tyson, Mayweather. I mean, we've had, that's 40 years, and for, you know, not Showtime, but for Paramount as a network to look at it and say, I don't know if combat sports is in our wheelhouse anymore.
Yeah.
It hurts. I mean, it's, you know, and I think, you know, obviously I'm saddened by it. I think more though for, you know, let's say, you know, people who are, let's say, in our PR department, or people who were 9 to 5, and this was their first gig out of college, and how are they gonna pay their rent now? To me, that's even more heartbreaking to some of the younger people that we have at work for, and they just clear out the entire sports department.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's heartbreaking to me, and it's sad. I think it's sad for the sport, and, you know, I hope the PBC lands on another platform, and I know the sport will still thrive, though.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you attribute this to? Because it just, you know, obviously the market in general is changing, just between new networks and different things.
Yeah.
But what would you attribute? Because I guess as fans, we're looking at Showtime like, man, there's so many, especially this year, there's so many big fights.
We've had probably one of the most successful years that we've ever had.
Yeah.
Financially.
Right.
I think that you hit it when you talk about the market change. The market has changed, and it's changed when you talk about a number of these. And I'm talking about these mega networks. When they look at the cost of doing business, and then they look at it and they say, okay, well, you know what? We still got to cut here. We got to cut here. This is making money, but you know what? We still got to cut. So now instead of, you know, now we got to start cutting muscle because it's gotten that tight. And I think, you know, Paramount just looked at it and said, okay, I think maybe we still want to invest in golf and football, whether it be college or the NFL, and golf, the Masters and all that stuff. But when it comes to combat sports, that's, I don't know if we want to do that. Plus, we have CBS Sports. So why does, and I know we have Showtime over there, but why does Showtime have a sports department? Let's save money. Let's cut that sports department and just have everything under CBS, and then just keep going forward with golf and football, and you know, we have to accept it.
Yeah. Do you think, obviously, PBC is up in the air, such a big part of the sport, you know, just as far as, he's not a promotion company, but, you know, as far as a stable is concerned. Do you think whatever next move they make will shift the landscape of what boxing continues to look like?
Well, I will say that, say what you want about Al Haymon, I think he's a brilliant businessman, and you know, listen, he's been a powerful figure in this sport for a reason, and I think he will find a platform that is best for the PBC.
Yeah.
And whether it be, let's say DAZN, boy, that would do nothing but enhance what they have over there. If it's with, let's say, Amazon, it would do nothing but enhance what they have over there, and give them another component where they can reach You know, obviously they've gotten into football and other sports, so now you can get into boxing. And kind of with the roster they have, let me tell you something. They can be just as powerful as Showtime did to build up and be the leader in the sport.
Have you met Al Haymon before?
I have.
You got to give us because nobody meets this. This guy's a mythical figure. He is a ghost. No one, what was that like the first time you met Al?
This is a true story. So this was maybe about, I don't know, I'm guessing maybe 5 years ago. And we were at a fight. It was a Floyd Mayweather fight. It was a Floyd Mayweather fight. And I want to say, and I don't think it was Mayweather McGregor, maybe a Mayweather Berto. Anyway.
Yeah.
It was during the weigh-in, and behind the curtain, behind stage, I was back there, and I ran into Sam Watson.
Yep. Shout out to Sam.
Shout out to my guy Sam Watson, and he said, "Hey Brian, I need to talk to you. Al Haymon wants to talk to you."
Oh, well, hold on. He wanted to talk to you? That's crazy.
Like,
that's crazy.
What?
Yeah.
And we walked in like this corridor. And then behind the curtain, literally was Al Haymon. And yeah, he was just like, you know, man, I just want to say, man, I love what you've been doing. It's great, this and that. You know, how's everything going? Blah, 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 blah. And I was like, you know, great. And it was different because he was like, wow, hearing his voice. And it was different from what I thought it was going to be like. And but no, he was great. He was nice. And I mean, literally, the conversation was at the most 10 minutes. And it was great talking to you. And I think I remember talking to Sam like, yeah, this was really interesting. I turned around and he was gone.
Oh, he's
gone.
Yeah, I don't know if Al actually exists. Al might be a ghost.
He was gone.
Really.
That's a true story. I turned around and he was gone.
Oh,
so when people say he's like a mystical ghost figure, that's what I think about, because when I turned around and I was like, where did he go?
If the ghost of Al is here, please summon me, please, because I would love to talk to you,
That's
Al.
a true story.
Come on the show. That's super dope. I love that.
And it was in Vegas. It was in Vegas.
I love that. So I have a lot of younger folks who watch this show and, you know, try to pick up gems from people successful as yourself as to how they did this, how you became who you are. I know I was listening to a Spaces on Twitter once. Steven Espinoza was in the Spaces, and I think someone asked him how do they select who, you know, is a part of the broadcast and things like that. And one of the things he said was, I think they were kind of, you know, people were pushing him like, hey, we need new people, we need more, you know, more people. How come you guys don't interview people from Twitter, stuff like that? And he said, you know, we give people shots all the time. I remember, he said, one of the last people, we gave Brian Custer a real shot, and he impressed everybody. And Brian, and he made a mention, and he made sure he said that you were one of the people that I guess he met, and I don't know how, but that, you know, he brought you on to the Showtime broadcast. Can you walk me through that? Like, how did you actually, what was that moment, I guess, with Steven and you actually being a part of Showtime?
So, you know, like people ask me all the time. First of all, you get here by a lot of hard work. You know, persevere, because it's not easy. And you got so many people who want to do it and believe they can do it. And you get in front of that camera, and you know millions are watching. It's a different animal. But it's always been my passion. And for me, I was calling fights in New York City. There was a guy, Lou DiBella.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right? So Lou DiBella had a program called Broadway Boxing.
I remember.
And it was on, at the time, it was airing on SNY, and I was working there, and I loved it. I would watch, and I would be like, well, who are these guys calling these fights, because they don't work at SNY, I don't see them. And I remember our president at the time said, oh, it's a local promoter, boxing promoter, some guy. He said he buys time, puts the show on there. And I said, well, I want to call those fights. And he looked at me crazy and said, you want to do boxing? I said, sure. And he said, well, I'll put you in touch with Lou and y'all can meet. If he hires you, whatever. And so he did. Me and Lou met at the network. And he's like, yeah, I watched your work. Yeah, I would love for you to call my fights. That'd be great. And I did it. I didn't even get paid because it was a time buy on SNY. And so our president at SNY said, well, it's a time buy. So if you want to do it, you got to do it, and you got to do it on your time. We're not paying them they paying us basically. So I called the fights, man, and I would call them. They would do them at BB King's in Times Square. and they would do them from like, Lou would have like 10, 11 fights on the card. So it would go from like 7 o'clock till basically 1 in the morning.
Right.
And so I would get off at work at SNY, get in a cab, head to Times Square, call those fights. And I did it for free for, I want to say, a few years. That's another thing I always say. Don't be afraid to do something for free, because you never know where it's going to lead. And a couple of years in, Ron Rizzo, who used to work for Lou, said, man, SNY, I can't believe we got the top of SNY calling these fights. They got to be paying you well to do all this. I said, they're not paying me to do this. And he looked flabbergasted. He's like, you mean for the past couple of years, you don't get paid? I said, no. Right. And he was like, oh, shoot. And he talked to Lou. He's like, we got to pay this guy. Because they were, Steve Farhood, my colleague, he was doing them. Brian Adams was doing them.
Wow.
And he's like, well, we pay them. He's like, oh, I didn't know. We didn't know. We thought SNY was paying you. And so he said, okay, we'll pay. And, they were paying me like, it was like $500. It was nothing.
Right.
It was nothing. I was like, it was $500 more than I was getting for the past couple of years.
Right.
And they ended up paying me to start doing those fights. And it just so happened one day I was in the newsroom. I got a phone call from a guy, David Dinkins Jr., who's the executive producer of Showtime Championship Boxing. And he said, I'm David Dinkins Jr., I'm the executive producer. He
That's
said,
the governor's son? The former governor's,
former mayor.
Former mayor's son?
Former mayor of New York City, his son.
Okay.
And he was like second in charge under Stephen.
Yeah.
And he called me one day and just said, "Hey man, I'm originally from New York. At the time he lived in Vegas, but he said I'm transitioning back." He said, "I'm back here with my parents. I'm watching a show called Broadway Boxing, and you do a hell of a job calling these fights." And he said, "Would you like to work at Showtime Championship Boxing?"
Wow.
And I was like, "I'd love to. It's always been a goal of mine."
Yeah.
And we met. And that's really that's the short story of how we did it. And I remember I went into the office and it was me, it was David, and it was Espinoza. And they said, well, look, we're gonna have you call a fight. We had a fight in Atlantic City. I remember Bernard Hopkins was on the card at the time, and they said, we're gonna have you call a fight. And I remember—
It's big, that's Bernard.
Yeah,
So
he said, I remember he said, I'm just going to say, depending on how you do,
right,
will kind of determine whether or not, we feel like you can fit in. And I said, okay. And I said, well, I'll just tell you this. And I said, I'm not going to be arrogant and I'm not going to be cocky. But I said, I relish that opportunity to do it. And I remember Espinoza was sitting across from me, him and David, and I told him, and I said, I guarantee you this, if you hire me, when it's all said and done, when it's over, you're going to look at yourself and say, Brian Custer is probably one of the best hires I've ever made. And Espinoza looked at me and was like, okay. And yeah, I did that fight in Atlantic City. Remember, I met Jimmy Lennon Jr. He's the first person I met.
Yep.
And he was like, hi, Brian, how are you?
That's good impressions.
Welcome to the team. And you're going to be great.
Yeah.
And called that fight. And yeah, sure enough, that right after that, they said, yo, and they gave me a contract and was like, welcome.
That's what's up, man. I love that, man. Great story, great gems. Outside of, what you've done, you've created and cultivated your own podcast, right? The Last Stand. I think during the pandemic was when I first when I first saw it. Was that when you created it? Did it start? Okay.
That's when I started.
Tell me, what was that like? Was it just, we're in a pandemic, we all have nothing to do, like, let me just make it happen?
And sports went away. People forget there was a number of us in sports did nothing. I mean, literally woke up, like, no, I got nothing going on. There was nothing. There was no sports. And I was like, I want to do something. And I had, obviously doing this job for so many times, you meet so many people. And I was like, man, I would love to I love talking to people. I love interviewing people. I love doing this. Yeah. And I was like, well, why don't I just do my own podcast? I think people are getting podcasts all the time. And why should I work for a company who may want me to talk about medical stuff or whatever? Why don't I do something that I want to do and talk to people who I want to talk to? And so I just said, okay, this is what I'm going to do it. And I ended up talking to a friend of mine who was really good with cameras and microphones, had his own little production company. Oh, go buy this, go buy that, go buy that. And why don't you shoot it by Zoom? That's probably the easiest thing you can do. And I can help you edit it, and that's what I did. And I just pulled out my phone and I started calling people. I was, Jay Wright at the time, Ice Cube, Michael Blackson, and like Errol Spence, and then I started calling. And what happened was, as I was doing these different guys every week, it just seemed like every time I would do a fighter, they would just the views and it would go viral for some reason.
Right.
I could interview Jay Wright, and it would be okay. And then I would do Errol Spence, and it would just be hundreds of thousands of views.
Right.
Or interview Tank, and it would just go crazy. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I should focus it more strictly on fighters.
Yeah.
And then I just went to the phone and just started calling all the guys from Charlo to Jay. I mean, I was just calling every guy, and they were like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
And we would talk, and that's kind of how it started.
I love that. What's your approach just when it's you get the elite of the elite on, as far as fighters are concerned on your podcast, what would you say, I guess, sort of has been able to make yours successful out of the other podcasts? There's a lot of different podcasts,
Yeah.
a lot of different shows. What do you think makes yours, I guess, stand out above the others?
I think a lot of it is, I think the authenticity of it. I think, guys know, I'm gonna shoot it straight with you, bro. I'm gonna be a buck with you.
Yeah.
So they know that. And so, let's say it's Tank. I usually I'm only gonna call them when I know they probably got a fight going on or something like that. And then I'll be like, yo, look, let's do the podcast. All right, well, let's talk about it. Now, you just had a little something
Right.
going on. I'm gonna ask you about it now.
Right.
I got to. All right. But so there is no 60 minutes, for old school. You have to Google this Mike Wallace gotcha type
I don't
stuff.
know that one. Mike Wallace. I'm gonna Google that one. Mike Wallace.
There's no old school 60 minutes gotcha type stuff where we
Yeah.
sit down and say, so tell me about that time you went to prison for messing with that little girl.
Yeah.
Whatever.
It's
You know
like,
what I mean?
yo,
What?
Yeah.
It's none of that.
I remember that guy tried it to Mike Tyson, and he almost got his head punched
Yes.
off.
So I'm gonna tell you ahead of time.
Yeah.
Nigel, we're gonna talk about this. I heard about you got a little trouble. We're gonna talk about it.
I respect that.
And so I let you know up front.
Yeah.
Just so you know. And I think guys just respect that. And a lot of times too, we cover different subjects sometimes. A lot of times I want to talk about a lot of stuff outside the ring. And then we'll get into the fight, but more so I think they kind of like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you obviously, you're on ESPN, you cover a lot of other sports. I heard you on college football the other day.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy boxing the most? How do you, in terms of just like when you're covering these sports, what's your passion like? What's your passion?
Well, my passion is all of it. It's almost like, someone asking me, and they ask me all the time. I have 3 boys, right? So they say this all the time. They like, who's your favorite son?
Yeah.
You love them differently.
Right.
You know what I mean? You can't love them all the same. You love them differently. And I think that's how with sports. Like right now, I'm loving football because we in football season.
Right.
So I'm loving it. Now, you ask me this next month, I may feel a little bit different because now it's hoop season. And so then I'll start doing college basketball, and then they'll throw me some NBA games, and I'll be like, man, I am loving hoop right about now. I don't even want to talk about no football, whatever. Right. And so for me, that's how it is. It's whatever season that I'm in.
Got you.
The thing about boxing is all year round. And it's not like we do it every week. You
Right.
do it like once a month.
Sure.
So yeah, I may miss it, but I know maybe at the end of the month my sugar is gonna be
right back. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's why I think my passion shows, because you're in whatever season you're in love with it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, just a few more questions.
Sure.
I want to talk about the big 3. I see
Yeah.
you're active around with Cube, man.
Yeah.
Shout out to Ice Cube.
Shout out to Q, that's my guy, man.
Man, I love what that brother has done
Yeah.
with the league. And like I said, I see you actively involved with that, covering the sport, being around Cube. I know recently in the media, Cube, I think there's like a lawsuit maybe, I guess, against the NBA saying that he felt like the NBA was doing things to be a detriment to what he's doing.
He was quite honest with us, and we would have talks about this, and listen, he was steadfast by saying that he felt like when he would have meetings with Microsoft, Monster, all these major brands about sponsoring the big 3, that they would be like, okay, we're going to do this, but the NBA said we shouldn't because we're also their sponsor, and that we shouldn't be supporting you financially. And he was like, that's cool. They can't do that, and that's against the law, and blah 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 blah. And I was like, really, the NBA? And he was like, oh yeah. Wow. And he was steadfast in telling us that a long time ago. So when the news just now started coming out and people started writing about it, it wasn't a surprise to me. Right. Because he was telling us this like at the beginning of the summer when they were, trying to get those brands to sign on. So, I mean, shout out to him to be, a black man in this country and to be a owner of a professional sports franchise. And we already see, when it comes to the NFL, he ain't getting nobody in there. Right. Shout out to Magic to finally having a piece, but not being the head guy of it. It's there's still, unfortunately in this country, there's not a lot of people who want a person whose skin has been kissed by the sun to be, in charge and doing well. Yeah. And I give him a lot of props for starting this league from scratch. Yeah. And then even saying, hey, look, we want to partner with you, NBA. Well, if you don't want to partner with us, you know what? That's fine. Then we still going to stay in our lane. Right. But I guess they didn't want them to stay in there. They want them out of here, especially when they started seeing them making inroads. Right. And listen, that was huge that Jaylen Brown, the highest paid player in the NBA, played in a Big 3 game.
That's huge.
Who said, you know what, forget the contract. I know I can get hurt. I know the team could find me. I'm going to play anyway because I rock with Cube. Yeah. That says a lot.
That means a lot, man. And Cube is a real brother, too. Cube, he ain't want to just Cube is a real brother, too.
Hey, man, they F the police, man. Know what I'm saying? You don't get no more real than that.
Right, yeah. Listen, Brian, another thing I really admire about you and your story is how vigilant you've been in spreading your message about prostate cancer. I know, just sort of doing my homework and reading about it, you had prostate cancer and you're open about speaking about it, and one of the things that affect black men at higher rates. Tell me about that, just, your foundation and just, everything you're doing surrounding it.
I just signed on to become a sports ambassador for the American Cancer Society. And I think it's just important, I think, for all men of color, if you're 40, especially if you're 40, first of all, you should always go get an annual check. You should always go get a physical. But if you're 40 and over, you should also get a PSA done. It's just a blood test. It's simple. It can save your life. It saved mine. For us, we are, without a doubt, if you look at the numbers, we're 3 times as likely to get prostate cancer than a white male. We're twice as likely to die from it than a white male. That alone should make you want to just go get checked anyway. Right. For me, it was the same thing. I was 40 at the time, and this was 10 years ago, and it was, I remember a friend of mine was like, oh, you're going to get your PSA done too? And I was like, for what? What's a PSA? Right. And they was like, for your prostate. I didn't even know what my prostate was. I was like, what's my prostate? Right. And they were like, nah, they say if you're a black male, at 40, you should be getting a PSA test. Okay, whatever. And so I went and I got it done. And I remember him telling me, like, if it's 4 and over, the results, and then we need to talk. If it's under a 4, then you should be okay. And to me, that's a misnomer, because whenever you have a PSA done, you should never be in whole numbers. Okay. If you're in whole numbers and you're at, let's say, 40, that's an issue, because even now, obviously now that I'm on the other side, I've had surgery, I've had radiation, but for a regular healthy guy like yourself, you go get a PSA done, you should be like 0.0 whatever. That should be your result. Okay. But if you're pumping out like a 1 or a 2, that should be saying something. Right. And at the time when I was 40, my number was 2.4. But all I heard was my regular doctor told me if it's under a 4, I'm good. Fine. Wow. So I was like, okay, cool. Now, another thing that we don't like, and I'm talking about men, especially black men, because we macho. Right. Now you get them blood tests, then they also give you the digital rectal exam. Yeah, I wasn't expecting the finger up the ass. Yeah, so I wasn't expecting the finger up the ass. I ain't gonna lie. I wasn't expecting the finger up the ass. So then when he gave me the finger up the ass, I was like, oh, this is what they talking about. Right. Oh, I feel like a bump. Right. But you got to get over that, because after I had my check at 41, I went to have my regular physical. I'm a guy that I'm probably the only person in my family that still gets a physical every year. No one else in my family still does that, except my younger brother now. He's more diligent in doing it. 41, I went and had my physical, and I remember the doc was like, hey, do you want to do your PSA? I was like, oh, doc, we good, man. I did that thing last year, man. We good. And he's like, oh, I don't remember the results. I was like, no, you said I was good. We ain't even,
Right.
none of that, bro. We good.
Again.
We good. So I got out of there as soon as I did my physical at 41.
Right.
And then the game went back again at 42, had my physical again, and he was like, hey, let's get you a PSA. I was like, oh, doc, we did that last year, bro.
Right.
I'm good. You remember that? And he was like, no, let me check just to be sure.
Right.
And he looked, and he said, oh, we didn't do it last year. He said, we did it at 40, but we didn't do it last year. And I was like, oh, here I go again. So I had to, bend over, and he had stick, and look until when he did it, he was like, ooh, I feel a bump on your prostate.
Oh, wow.
And then he said, well, we did the blood test. And again, he was like, yo, we can get the results back. If it's anything over 4 and over, we got to talk. If it's under a 4, then, you should be okay. And we got it back, and it was like a 5.2. So he had more than double in a year's time.
Wow.
And I tried to even hide that. When I got it and looked at the results, I was like, oh, well, it's 5.2. That's just a point over
like, it's not
a 4.
that bad,
It
right?
ain't that bad. You know what I mean? I'm sitting here trying to justify it in my mind.
Right.
I know he said he felt a bump on my back, but that could be a lot of things. That could be anything. And so I'm trying to justify it. I ended up calling him, told me, yeah, it means something. You got to come back in here. Let's do it again to be sure. Did the check again? Yep. It's still feeling that bump. Did another blood test, came back again, 5.2, and he was like, yo, the only way we'll know what's going on is if we do a biopsy.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, a biopsy. Man, and that was brutal. That biopsy is no joke. The needle's like this long, they stick that thing up your butt.
Oh, you awake too?
Now, here's the difference. Now they give you something to put you to sleep.
Oh, okay.
10 years ago,
handle that
they
awake.
didn't.
Yo, damn.
Just 10 years ago, they did. They pulled this horse needle thing out that was like, nah. As I tell a story, it gets long.
Yeah, I know. It started like this.
Truth of the matter is, that needle was about like this long. It was about this long, but now when I tell it, it's like this long. But no, hey, man, he shot that thing, and like a biatch as soon as he hit me with that thing. Right. And they took the samples, and long story short, I remember he called me in his office when he got the results back. 7 of the 12 were cancerous, aggressively cancer. And he just basically told me, he said, look, man, don't tell me that you have a nephew who's getting ready to graduate, or you got a family vacation that you're about to go on. He said, you got cancer, it's not fucking around, and I gotta get you in surgery like now. And I had surgery like 3 weeks later.
How did that affect, I guess, just your family, like having to tell them that?
Yeah, it was man, that was rough. It was rougher, talking to my boys, because your boys look at you as like Superman. And I had to tell them, like, do you guys know, they were young too at the time. At the time, my boys were like 10 and whatever. And so they were like, cancer, is that a disease? And then they wanted to know if I was going to die, which was crushing to me. And, I had to reassure them, and I didn't know, but I'm like, yeah, Dad's going to be strong. I'm going to be great. Don't worry about it. I'm going to be good. But it gives you a whole new perspective on life. I certainly don't take any day for granted anymore. Knowing that, you're facing your own mortality, and that, like the doc said, that, had I not had surgery, and had I not been as diligent as I was, that I would have been dead within a year.
Wow. And
that's how aggressive prostate cancer can be, especially when you're young, and it feels like it's in a young, thriving body. When you're a lot older, it lays kind of dormant. But when you're young, you're virile, you're active, it feels like, ooh, this is good, it's raging. And they call it the silent killer for a reason. If you know, I didn't have any symptoms. Now when you're a lot older, some people have differences. Maybe they can't urinate. Maybe they feel like they have the sensation that they have to urinate, and then when they get there, they can't. Those type of things. I didn't have none of that. Felt great. I was in the best shape that I was. And they call it the silent killer for a reason, because a lot of times when you have prostate cancer, you don't know you have it until it's too late. And so luckily, I was lucky that I got caught, and that's the key to it. It is like 95% treatable if you catch it early. And God thank you that he caught my eye
Wow.
before it was too late.
Wow. All right, brothers, I'm going to be 35 this year. I got 5 years and
5
I'm in there. So make sure anyone, if you're 40, we got to go do that.
You got to do it.
We got to go do that.
I will say this. If you have any history
Yeah.
of cancer in your family, I would even talk to my doctor now.
Wow.
And then my doctor even told me that. On my side of my father's side of the family, on Custer, a lot of cancer.
Yeah,
my
too.
uncles died of cancer, by bone cancer, lung cancer. My aunt died of breast cancer. And so like I was telling, when the doctor was talking to me, I was like, well, you know, usually your father's the benchmark. I said, but my father didn't have cancer, and he died at a younger age, though. And I said, but my uncles died of bone cancer. My aunt died of breast cancer, his sister. And he said, the common denominator is cancer. Mm-hmm. It just so happened that when they were pulling the cards, your uncle pulled bone cancer, this one pulled lung, this one, your aunt pulled breast, you pulled the prostate cancer card. And so I would say to you, if your family has a history of cancer, at 35, that would be the first time I would get a PSA test.
All right. I got health insurance, so I'm gonna definitely take your word for it, brother.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that message for real,
Absolutely.
honestly. So last couple questions, man. I just want to know, what do you think is the biggest fight in the sport right now? Because this year we got the Tank Ryan was the big one, Errol Spence and Bud, obviously. Yeah. What do you feel like is the biggest one right now?
There's always a great. I would love to see Tank on, another one of these top guys whomever comes out. I mean, I know Prograis and Haney are going to fight. I know people wanted to see Haney and Tank. I know people would love to see Shakur and Tank, and I would love to see that.
It's a bad boy.
I would love to see them, you know. And again, this is where the business of boxing comes into play. Those two want to fight. Yeah. The business of boxing may say, well, Tank is up here when it comes to Q rating and draw. I don't know if Shakur is there yet. And let's let that marinate until he can try to build him up till he can get to that point. Yeah. But we all want to see them fight. I think that would be a phenomenal fight. I mean, I don't know why, Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder.
Yeah. I saw Wilder called them out the other day, so I'm hoping we get that.
Come on, let's get that on. Let's get Fury and Usyk to fight. Let's get an undisputed heavyweight champion. The sport needs that. Yes. And so I think those are a number. There's so many great matchups. I would love to see, just from the fight, I'd love to see Bud and Charlo fight. Let's get them. You know what,
Brian? I ain't gonna lie. I wanted to see that till the Canelo fight. I was so mad, Brian. I was so mad at Charlo, man.
No, but you got to think again that he came up 2 weight divisions. Yeah. He came up 2 weight division to fight a guy and you can't blame him. He took the money. I take the money too to come up 2 weight divisions.
Oh yeah, we all gonna take that money.
You're gonna take that.
I'll let Canelo beat me up for a couple $5 million for sure.
And he can say, hey, look, this dude did knock me out like he did these other cats. Right. I didn't take the kind of punishment these other cats took. Yeah. But now it's on even more of an even playing field. Now you fighting Bud at 154. It's Bud the guy who's got to come up.
That's right.
But the performance he put on against Errol.
That was all right. Because I'm a FanDuel. If y'all want to come sponsor the show, I'm a big FanDuel guy. You know what I'm saying? So I knew that Bud was gonna stop him late. Really? Yes. But I didn't know it was gonna look like that. I had no idea it was gonna look like that. Where do you think Errol goes from here? Because I hear different people. Some people like he needs to retire. Errol needs to just go to 54. Like, what do you think Errol should do after that?
I really think that Errol. Listen, this guy's an alpha. And so I think he looks at it and says, man, you put me at 154, it'd be a different story. I think I boiled my body down one too many times at 147. Yeah. And paid the price. Yeah. And he paid the price for it. Lethargic, didn't really have it. And that is not taking anything away from Bud, because Bud was phenomenal. Yeah. Bud fought better than I've ever seen Bud Crawford fight that night. That's right. He was great. Yeah. He was great. I think Errol's probably looking at it like, okay, I just need to be at 154. I need to be at 154, 160, where I'm naturally. And stop boiling that body down. And they caught up with him. Yeah. They caught up to him. Yeah. I think, look.
You think he got some life left still?
Yeah, that's one loss. Yeah. Now, if at 154 he still looks that lethargic, to me then, yes, all the other stuff in the past, from the car accidents and all
yeah.
that stuff now has come into play.
Yeah.
Has come into play into that. But if at 154, I think we should see a different Errol Spence Jr. It's one loss.
Yeah,
it's
I agree.
one loss. It's amazing how in our sport, one loss is like the end of the world.
Literally.
MMA, these guys have like 3-4 losses. People love it.
Right.
They celebrate that. Like, oh, okay, well, I can't wait to see this guy back in the ring again.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Very true. No, I would love to see Errol back at 54.
Yeah.
Preferably not against Bud. Stay away from that. He is a killer. Stay away from Bud.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
I'm going to shout out to my man Bubba Dub, because Bubba Dub is the best, and he said he hit him everywhere except up under his feet.
Yeah, for real. You right about that.
The only place he did. That's the only place he didn't hit
that.
Errol that day.
For sure.
Shout out to Bubba Dub.
Yeah, I like that.
I rock with you. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, last one. Do you think, does Bud have a shot at Canelo? Because I told, Shakur Stevens is my man. So, me and Shakur talk. I interviewed him right after your interview. And he's convinced. He tells me all the time, like, I'm telling you, obviously Bud's his man. So, you go support your man. But he's like, I'm telling you, Bud can beat Canelo. Do you think that is something that is possible? At 168 also. We're not talking about
168, that's tough.
So, yeah.
I mean, that's 3 weight divisions. Mm-hmm. That's 3 weight divisions that he got. You see what happened when Charlo won up 2.
Yeah.
And then he felt that power. It's like, whoa, hey, these dudes here. And Bud is a tough mother sucker.
Yeah.
So it's just not a fair fight. It's not a fair fight. I don't have any interest in seeing that.
Yeah.
I really don't. But I mean, if they can make it happen, it can happen. But Canelo's already told me, what do I get out of it? Because if I beat him, people gonna be like, bro, he was 3-4 weight divisions smaller than you.
That's true.
What are we giving you that for? Yeah.
That's true.
Absolutely.
No, well, listen, Brian, I really appreciate your time. You dropped a lot of gems today. Yeah. An amazing interview. Again, make sure y'all get checked out, man. We got a lot to live for.
Yeah.
We got a lot of things to do. I hope y'all enjoyed this episode. My man, Brian Custer.
Yeah, my man.
Super dope episode of Cigar Talk. We out of here. Bye.